depending on where you are, good afternoon, good morning, or good evening to everyone. I'm Peter Bernstein, Senior Editor of TMCnet.com, and I'll be moderating today's webinar, What a Private Cloud Can Do for Your Business. This is the second in our three-part series of webinars regarding Infrastructure as a Service, IaaS, that we hope you and your colleagues will participate in all of them, actually. I'm delighted to be joined today by William Raby, Director, International Business Development, savvisdirect, and Andy Mayer, Senior Product Manager for savvisdirect. First, a little background. It's no secret that in looking at the accelerating move to the cloud, three aspects of the move are critical: data center transformation and virtualization of the data center, intra and inter networking, and storage. However, when to move, what to move, why, how, and with whom are all things that need to be investigated, planned for, and then executed with a trusted partner. And even if you're convinced of the value of moving to the cloud, what type of cloud solution makes the most sense for your organization, public, private, or hybrid, is something that needs to be considered and is critical. Today's session, as the title suggests, is about why a private cloud solution might be the right one for your organization. What William and Andy will be presenting in the next few minutes will be details on the benefits of migrating to a single-tenant, dedicated private cloud, one you can quickly design, deploy, and manage. The application delivery lifecycle, including software development, web applications, and business services, and all while mitigating risk and avoiding costly hardware purchases. Pain-free is a phrase you're going to hear regarding how businesses of any size can implement private cloud-based applications and servers to fit their unique needs. William and Andy are going to review private cloud benefits such as reducing risk by cutting costs on IT infrastructure, keeping up with growth pains affordably by adding resources on a pay-as-you-go and pay-as-you-grow basis, freeing up IT staff to do more with greater efficiency, quickly getting to a development sandbox and get it up and running. And hopefully the takeaways when our session concludes will be the value of separating infrastructure from applications, how to produce instantly available virtual network elements, VPNs, load balancers, firewalls, and do this with a drag and drop click of your mouse, and what questions to ask to better understand your organization's private cloud requirements. Before turning the session over to William and Andy, I'd like to go over just a few administrative details for our session. William and Andy will answer questions during the Q&A session that will follow the presentation, and I encourage you to submit your questions using the interface on your PC at any time during the presentation and not just during the Q&A. We're going to get to as many of your questions as we possibly can, but any that we're unable to answer are going to be archived, and I know William and Andy and the savvisdirect team will be happy to answer them offline following today's event. The entire event, as I said, will be archived, and each of you will be receiving information from us tomorrow in your inbox on how to access today's webinar so you can follow up on anything you missed or pass the information, hopefully, on to colleagues. With that said, our presenters have a lot of information they would like to share, so we're going to dispense with lengthy introductions and jump right in. And William, he's the handsome guy on the left. It's all yours.
Hi, thank you, everybody, and welcome to the session today. We appreciate everybody's time, and we hopefully are going to take you through a journey of private cloud and how today's great IT challenges is met by a form of private cloud. So we're going to talk about what is a private cloud essentially. We'll talk about the separate infrastructures from applications. Andy is going to take us through some of the key concepts and private cloud examples, and then we also going to be look at how do you migrate from a private cloud today. So with that, I'll step into the first section of that, and let's just briefly look at what is a private cloud. Is many definitions out there of various different type of cloud services. So we've spent some time on trying to define what this is here at Savvis, and we'll talk about that today. So essentially, a private cloud is built on dedicated infrastructure, which is exclusively for your organization. It can be hosted in your own data center. It can be hosted in a partner data center or at a cloud vendor's data center. So a private cloud can provide you with all the benefits of public cloud. It has scalability. It has market responsiveness, business agility, cost management, all of the various aspects that IT business owners and DevOps are really looking for. But with the extra added benefit of security of top-class firewalls, data centers, dedicated hardware, and dedicated network to help you secure that company's data. So a private cloud can help companies of all sizes and shapes who want to accelerate innovation within the organization itself, have significant computing requirements, or have very strict control on security and compliance needs. Private cloud enable organizations to have complete control and visibility over the computing, security, regulation, compliance, service level, and functionality within a specific framework that works best for them. So private clouds can also empower organizations to leverage the power of the cloud for software development projects, for instance. The benefit of this is scalability and speed, getting from one part of the process right through to the end goal in a relatively quick space of time. So you can get a sandbox up and running really fast, and it's more flexible. And developers can also now be much more productive, and instead of having to be concerned regarding the infrastructure that lies behind it and actually going to the data center and pulling cables and switching gear, they can actually now focus on the ability to develop the applications, which is really what they want to do. New developers can be more productive quicker in that sense. Then QA teams can be more efficient, and the solution helps to ensure fast and efficient delivery of business services and provides a low-risk method for increasing infrastructure while better controlling the ultimate goal, which is cost. So a private cloud, unlike a public cloud, is dedicated to one organization. Some critical data or heavy computing resides in a private cloud, while other data is stored and accessible from a public cloud and can be more beneficial in this hybrid type cloud environment. So the hybrid cloud storage combine the advantage of scalability, reliability, rapid deployment, and potential cost savings of public cloud storage with the security and full control of private cloud storage. So while all types of cloud have different advantages, we're going to focus on the reasons for migrating to a private cloud. So with that, I'll hand over to Andy to take us through the next sections.
Great. Thank you, William. So while there's a lot of we went one too far here. There's a lot of value in separating infrastructure from the applications. One of the things that causes projects to lose sight of the delivery timelines are commingling the dependencies between the applications and the infrastructure itself. And this is something that we believe is a real advantage of, in particular, the savvisdirect App Grid solution, which is we can make that separation nearly complete. And we have taken a big step here to what is a true software-defined data center. And by doing that, you get off the dependency of spending capital up front for hardware and having slow timelines for scalability. It's really critical and allows the developers and the DevOps team to focus on, and the QA teams to focus on the actual product, not the deployment. And thereby you accelerate time to market, and you get greater development control and agility. We have with AppGrid in particular, not only made all of the tools available visually, but as well, because it is a architecture-oriented solution, we have the ability to, through software, define load balancers and firewalls, version control infrastructure changes, and create reusable architecture patterns. And so this is quite a novel approach to the private cloud. What are some of the best use cases or ones that we've identified here? There really are no limits to the use cases and the solutions that you can accomplish with private cloud, assuming you're doing the diligence you need around security. And private cloud really is primarily differentiated by the increased security that customers have. Whether you're simply backing up data of a file server, or you are really focused on mission-critical systems like your ERP system, private cloud gives you the ability to support all your critical functions of finance, sales, marketing, and operations. And it gives you, less downtime. A perfect example of private cloud and its increased security are databases. Databases frequently don't run well in a public cloud multi-tenant infrastructure. There's too many noisy neighbors. What do we mean by that? There's too much resource contention, particularly around hard drives, disks and storage, et cetera, but as well at every level. And databases tend to be fairly intensive. So that's a great example of something that you benefit from a private cloud, and as well facilitate if you want to do some hybrid clouds, and you can run your web and application servers on a shared multi-tenant infrastructure while your data remains secure and high performance in a private cloud. What's another good example? Well, we have had some experience and some conversations with the Centers for Disease Control. And they find, and as well as many other customers, that the sandbox type of use is very critical. Again, you take the secure data, you take the lack of noisy neighbors, but having a fully managed private cloud allows you to quickly prototype and set up new technologies to kick the tires of products you haven't used before without involving IT, server admins, and network folks much less so than you have in the past. So it's quite easy to try out new things and to be more responsive to the demands of the business, whether that's the CDC as dealing with the health matters across the country and sometimes the world. They oftentimes have to set up solutions with very little forewarning. So the private cloud gives you that flexibility to be responsive. Along with that, as a corollary, is setting up new environments for software development and testing, whether that's integration testing, total quality testing, end-to-end testing. One of the things that is time-consuming in setting up a project and a program is coming up with a developer tool set and maintaining those standards across the developers' workstations. Everybody likes to do their own thing, particularly around developers, but there is a lot to be said for getting them productive quickly, having standard tools so that you get consistent results. And so a private cloud really is a key way to create a more efficient and flexible application development environment. Whether you're a financial services company, software design company, this is one of the best ways to implement Agile at the team level rather than at the code level. rather than managing physical servers, dealing with broken hard drives, developers can really provision and decommission virtual servers and other infrastructure quickly. They can have mouse-driven architectures.
Something else to add here as well, with the AppGrid product that Savvis has is the ability to templatize these development environments to quickly and easily go through not only the stages of development, test dev, pre-production, out to production. That could be very much template driven, create once, and then replicate very quickly to give multiple development teams the ability to quickly collaborate across a number set of stages, but also creating some base foundations to also test and develop against the multitude of delivery platforms that we have available to us in the market today with tablets and PCs and the web out there. And this concept really does make the private cloud, the AppGrid product, very, very beneficial. It also gives individuals, because you have dedicated resources available to you, it gives you the ability to go and find those resources to specific tasks and workloads that you want to have your product or capabilities resourced in certain ways to make sure that you adhere to all of the different platforms that you're trying to deliver it at.
Very good points. Very good points. So when we look at whether you're managing an IT team, managing budgets, you've heard of cloud, you're comfortable with cloud, you're uncertain about it, you really have to establish what are your requirements. And I'm not talking about the fundamental low-level stuff. Those are important, and you certainly will get there, and we'll talk about that in migration. But what I'm talking about here are fundamentally the a priori or the top-down considerations. So what's the strategy that you're supporting? What are your strategic objectives? Is it cost containment? Is it moving from capital expenditure to operational expenditure? Is it being more agile and more responsive? Is it a wholesale strategy to move to the cloud and get out of your data closet? In planning and considering the cloud, understanding the workloads that you're going to have is then the next decision. What are the requirements for those workloads? And so are these the mission-critical production applications? Are they the infrequently used production applications? Again, are we looking at setting up development environments, et cetera? One of the key advantages to being successful, and of course we all want to be successful when we take on new initiatives, is that we have to understand our users. And so from the developer standpoint, the architect standpoint, and security, what is everybody looking for? What do they expect? Managing those expectations, defining the goals for the team, all critical. What will be the impact on existing methodologies? Different companies have various stage gates for projects, approvals, design reviews, the workflows that they have for setting up and deploying code. These could all change depending on what you have in place today. Now, one of the things that's really critical, everybody talks about security. They're worried about the impacts of moving to the cloud. Well, the cloud solutions out there often have a lot of options that will help you establish policies for managing identity and access control, user permissions, and so on. Who can start and stop a VM? Who can create a new one? Who can change one? And so these are things that you should have some plans about before you really bite off the vendor evaluation. One of the other things that you really need to understand is how dynamic are your needs in the cloud. Very different vendors have different capabilities in terms of having full redundancy and the level of effort for creating backups and securing your data from loss. And this is an important part that I'll highlight a little bit more as we go forward. That everybody talks about security, and they almost always mean avoiding data breaches or hackers of nefarious sorts. But the real challenge for security is that of the data integrity and the application availability. And that's one of the primary benefits of moving to a private cloud from a service provider. So, again, have your strategy set before you start looking at vendors. If you start jumping in with vendors, I think that you run the risk of getting lost in the forest, not seeing the forest for the trees, and really not understanding what your objectives are from strategy down through tactics. So what are the key features, advantages, and differentiators? Well, there's a lot here, and we're going to walk through these and step through them. And again, these are examples. They're not meant to be exhaustive, but one of the key things is having this application delivery lifecycle tool. And that's really key as companies work in teams, and there's lots of moving parts. When you're developing new web applications, you definitely can save developers time through avoiding manual repeated processes, improper configurations. As we mentioned, AppGrid has the ability to version control code and infrastructure, and using other tools on the market, you can really make your environments highly repeatable and avoid lots of manual efforts. So developers' work really becomes, again, that mouse-driven architecture. Within minutes, they can set up and configure into your architectures and have that fully integrated into the tools that they know and understand for code control. Some of the environments out there allow you to identify the systems as, say, sandbox mode and imitate production levels of network and load. With AppGrid and other technologies in the market, you are able to design and using software your QA environment and mimic production and deploy that through the clicks of a button. Especially when you're looking at solutions where you have patterns and architectures that you want to repeat, and you could package those up so you can easily deploy scalable web applications when you choose. Assuming your application architecture handles concurrency well, deploying multi-tier applications becomes far simpler. DevOps or developers can rapidly reproduce various deployment architectures from the catalog. As I said, there are, especially with AppGrid and others, but AppGrid in particular is a software-defined data center with full code repository integration, so your configurations can be version controlled in the architectures. And so whether you're using a commercial product or building your own end-tier application infrastructure, you should look at these options so that your deployments that once took you weeks can now be done in hours. Check to see if you can get pre-assembled subsystems. See if the users can version control infrastructure. These are key ingredients. Now, of course, security is a fundamental aspect of private cloud, and as I said before, it is the one that stands out in people's minds the most. So, any cloud provider of a decent heft and market presence will often be more secure than what you have today. I like to say a lot of companies today have data closets. They don't have data centers. Their systems aren't properly controlled from janitorial staff, consultants, contractors, people in other companies, whereas in your cloud service provider data centers, they have physical security of usually several levels. But as well, all the networks are secure with multiple firewalls, intrusion detection and prevention, denial of service prevention, fire suppression, and redundant power. These are things that are very uncommon in even fairly large mid-sized companies. So, because it's running on dedicated infrastructure, you are far more secure. But as well, there are other levels here that you get from a cloud service provider. In addition to private cloud security, you will have these top-grade data centers. And so, when you talk about the cloud, aside from, the benefits of security in the private cloud, the cloud in general, people like it because you have near infinite scalability, which you'll hear called elasticity. Now, near infinite, yeah, definitely not infinite. But with private cloud, you're not investing in expensive hardware all the time. If you have new projects, seasonal loads, it's easy to scale up and scale down and add storage, RAM, or CPU capacity as your business needs increase on a pay-as-you-go basis. Be responsive to your customer and the market and the rapid pace of your critical projects. You can get your new hires productive faster without having to buy more servers necessarily. You can lease them. Again, you can partition out the private cloud infrastructure to different projects and business units within your organization. Far simpler than the old model of buying hardware per project, per business unit. These systems have the ability to track spend and manage rights across different organizations. One of the key things to consider as well in your vendor evaluation is how are they going to help you? How are they going to customize the level of support you need? Whether it's self-service assistance or 24/7 web and technical support, you want a company that gets your private cloud up and running when you need it, helps you get started, and is there when you need them in an emergency. We pride ourselves on that, and we know that any new platform can take some time to learn. And so, particularly at savvisdirect, we've planned that along the way, and we'll talk about that some more in a bit. One of the other things that's really key for considering a private cloud vendor is redundancy. And we're not saying simply redundancy within a data center, as we talked about for power and network, but as well, you have the option of geo-redundancy, whether that is to avoid natural disasters, data centers burning down, or more commonly, the application availability. You need to consider options for all of those. So, you peel back the covers, look behind the green curtain at what the cloud provider is offering in terms of redundancy and what's the level of effort to implement it. Is it click and drag a configuration step as it is with AppGrid, or is there a lot of heavy scripting and a lot of heavy testing required to create that redundancy? How would you move or copy your N-tier architecture from one data center to another? And then as well, everyone wants and values the benefits of open source, open cloud solutions, open cloud architecture. And they help you avoid vendor lock-in. They allow you to find technical resources in the market with the skills you need. And, it is kind of the standard now that these cloud vendors are advocating open cloud architecture. So it doesn't pay to have all your eggs in one basket. You want to make sure that you can find another basket if that one's not quite the right weave, if it doesn't suit your needs in some way or another. What virtual machine images are supported? Are you going to have to convert a virtual machine image? Not a big deal, but definitely worth considering. What are the breadth of operating systems they handle, and are they the ones that you need? Does the environment integrate with the tools that you use? Whether that is software management, version control, or application deployment infrastructure tools like Chef and Puppet. So if you're using Subversion for your code, gosh, wouldn't it be nice to be able to also use that to manage the infrastructure changes that go on in your environment? Not just configuration files, but firewall routing rules and more. And so there's a lot to consider. Don't be overwhelmed, but they're all key to picking that vendor. And once you've picked your vendor, you've established your goals, what is next? Well, it's migrating, and migration is a simple thing to say. It's more work than you might imagine at first as you start to peel back the covers. But we've got on the savvisdirect blog quite a lot of information on how you go about planning and executing a migration. I wrote these. They are different than your typical blog because they're quite long and detailed. I highly encourage you to read them. It certainly gives you a good outline for a project plan. Where do we start? Well, once you've got the strategy defined and your goals, well, you got to start inventorying your assets, whether that's the amount of storage you use, the amount of RAM that's consumed, the amount of CPU that's used, what software licenses are valid. A lot of this work is work that is good to have done in any event. It might help you in a business continuity scenario, might help you contain costs if you're spending money on licenses that aren't going used. But the next step, once you've got your arms around the assets that you have and your plans, is to start virtualizing the applications and systems. It makes life a lot easier. Now, alternatively, you can reinstall software in the cloud and migrate just your data. And again, those options are outlined in the blog. One of the other key things, beyond starting to virtualize your solutions, is to automate your processes, and this is where code management tools come in handy, right? So you can automate deployments into your standard development processes, and where your work processes can be mapped into an automated software configuration tool. Building the private cloud is the final stage, and if you plan right and take the steps to inventory and have a good plan and timing, then actually doing so is time-consuming, but fairly straightforward. You've got your plan, you can execute it, and there are ways to execute it so you don't have these crazy long cutover weekends. And you can find those details in the savvisdirect blog. But it's also important when you're doing your migration to not jump in with both feet. I think you definitely want to play and experiment, understand what's capable, what's not capable. I would say you should start with a frequently used but not mission-critical application. And then, take the time to not just simply replicate what you've got, but make things better. Where applications have broken, the cloud makes it easier to make them redundant. If you have failed to clean up some user security, take that time to clean up some user security. So, migration is an opportunity to not just control cost and become more agile, using cloud, those powers that the cloud provides, but it's an opportunity to improve your business operations across the board. So with that, I'm going to pass the torch back to William.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Andy. And just to add on to that last part of the migration to the cloud, we work with many different types of customers out there, and we've actually got a team of folks that's sitting ready to work with anyone who is thinking about that transition into a private cloud or the migration and the capabilities around that. And so we have processes and work streams that we can work with anyone who's trying to migrate into the cloud and kind of look at all the points that Andy just brought up there, make recommendations, advice, and lead you through that journey into the cloud. We also have the onboarding process that we guide customers through, the assessment, the evaluation, and then ultimately migrating that workload into the cloud through a series of sessions that we can guide you with. So it's a full service organization. We can provide some services as well. So probably the most important step to migrating to a private cloud is determining what exactly your organization wants to gain out of the migration. If you can summarize your requirements, your goals, your budget ITs, challenges into a succinct report, you'll be more likely to get what you need from potential vendors, and they will gain more insight into the reasoning behind migrating to a cloud type environment. So don't hesitate to work together with cloud vendors. There's a multitude of cloud vendors out there, including ourselves. They can help you determine what you need the most to get the best out of cloud solutions. So with that, we wanted to thank you for listening to us today. We're now going to have a Q&A session. I see there's a number of questions that's already come through, and we'll answer these as we go through them.
So that was the easy part. Now we get to the hard part. That was terrific, guys. Before we get to your questions, let me remind you how to ask them, which is if you look on your viewer there, you'll see a new question button. All you have to do is push it, type in your question, and it will come up in queue, and hopefully we will get to it. I also want to remind everybody that you'll be receiving a follow-up email from us with information on how to access the archived version of today's presentation so you can review it at your leisure and pass it along to colleagues. With that said, let's get to some of those questions. The first one's actually for you, William. And the questioner says, I'm still not clear about the difference between private and public clouds, and I actually want to add a little bit of discussion to this as well, which is, can you walk people through the difference between single-tenant and multi-tenant and why that's important?
Yes, I mean there's a great deal of difference, obviously, between those two models. You're looking at aspects like resource sharing. You're looking at aspects like cost, and you're also looking at aspects of just availability. So you need to decide which of these aspects are important to you. And which aspects you can actually forego. So the difference between I would say a public cloud and a private cloud, private cloud sits within that very private space, whether that's inside or outside of a firewall, with access granted based on the requirements of the application or the user or the end user within the framework of the privacy. The second part of that is also its dedicated resources, so dedicated down to the actual hardware itself. There's no other tenants sharing that hardware with you. On the private cloud, it is truly dedicated servers that has the dedicated compute in terms of processors, memory, hard drive, and network associated with that. Where on the public side, it's a multi-tenanted environment, and these VMs, virtual machines, are created on a needs basis, on a customer basis, so the resources can actually be shared across a multitude of tenants within the organization. So I think that's the key fundamental differences. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but I just want to, because I know once people hear that, what they say is, okay, that's really interesting. Does that mean single tenant is more secure than multi-tenant, number one? And number two, as somebody who has had more than my fair share of tours through data centers, I think it's also important to highlight the fact that those racks are separate and they are dedicated.
Yes, they truly are dedicated. Down to the server component is truly dedicated. So, in terms of security, is it more secure? It does have a great deal of elements that provide that additional security that is intended for the end user. So, Andy, I know you've got something you want to add to that as well.
Yes, I was going to say two little things. I think one, aside from single tenancy being one of the key aspects of private cloud, that is, when we say single tenancy, we mean that you're sharing nothing with other companies. You may share within your own company different business units, but the other is having a secure network option. And so that is, the two things that make it really stand out, private versus public. Some people would argue private cloud has to be within your own data center, within your own buildings, but with the amount of connectivity and hosting people do in other data centers, really it comes down to how secure is that network. And when people say multi-tenant, what they're talking about is you take a given physical piece of hardware and you might run 10 different operating systems on it with 10 different VMs, and you could have 10 different customers on there. And while the security issues are very difficult to run those exploits, it is more than theoretically possible. Does it happen? It happens some. The cloud service providers and the hypervisor vendors have gotten increasingly better at making multi-tenant cloud secure. But again, the risks are real. They aren't purely theoretical, though they are very difficult to execute those exploits.
So while I have you on the subject, there's a follow-up question that's very pertinent here, which is, I heard that multi-tenant hosting using virtual machines on a single server is starting to be included in private clouds. Is that true?
I'm not sure I've tracked that. But what I think they're alluding to is what I keep calling, sharing infrastructure within a company, right? So,
right. I interpreted it the same way, which is it's not really multi-tenant, meaning multiple companies, but it's sharing intra-corporate.
That's right. And you still are going to need to have often some separation of roles and responsibilities and access, because when I worked for a very large financial institution. I had access to the HR applications, but I didn't have access to the general ledger applications, for example. So even though they might run on the same infrastructure and they're generally secure from prying eyes outside the company, you still might need to have internal controls in your private cloud.
Okay, we're gonna go through a series of questions that relate basically to the same subject, which is, and I'm going to ask you the question, and then I'm going to see if I can find the right place and throw the right slide up here, which is, can you provide an example of separating infrastructure from apps? And I believe I'm pushing the right one out for you. Good one?
Yeah, that's perfect. So the principal idea here of separating infrastructure from the apps is that is going back to this historical model where if you're deploying a new set of applications, you'll buy new hardware. and you buy new hardware from dev to test, QA to production, and that hardware and the firewalls and the load balancers and the network switches are attached to an application and attached to a project. And so when you look at the more advanced private cloud options, and we talk about the software-defined data center, it's breaking that chain. And in particular with AppGrid, firewalls and load balancers are all defined as virtual appliances. They are virtual machines of their own. So if you need a load balancer that has a lot of throughput or is doing sophisticated spreading of requests using custom algorithms, you can scale that to be a full-size virtual machine or a fractional size of a virtual machine. So rather than racking an F5 or Cisco device, it's physical that you can walk up to, and it's different from the servers that are running your database. In these cases, you can use a homogeneous approach and easily copy configurations and back them up. And so you are getting out of this idea of a hardware-based device that is dedicated to an application, and that everything becomes essentially a form of software.
So that brings up the next one, which is very closely related, which is, can you help me understand what dedicated equipment is when it comes to a private cloud? Would my data really have its own server, number one? What other parts of the infrastructure are dedicated to my business only? And are there any parts that are shared with other enterprises? Well, we already went over that one. I think we beat that one to death. But let's go back to the first two that were asked there. Would my data really have its own server?
That would be a fundamental requirement of calling something a private cloud, yes.
Okay, that's what I thought. And the second one was, what other parts of the infrastructure are dedicated to my business only?
At the very least, I would say that you should have a dedicated network connection to the internet or to your private network. And you're probably going to share, almost certainly will share a switch, a network switch with the customers, but the actual network segment that you're on should be dedicated.
Next question is there a way to provide security in a private cloud with mobile devices accessing the apps and the data?
There is, but that's really not dependent on the private cloud infrastructure as much as your application architecture and your devices. So, if you look inside the Windows, inside the Apple iOS configurations on the iPad or the iPhone, they have options to connect them via VPN. So it's quite possible using that methodology or others. There's plenty of other options to actually keep those applications private, even when you are, say, accessing them from Starbucks. So your iPad would connect to the corporate VPN, and you would have access to your private apps hosted on your private cloud.
And the fact of the matter is, one of the strengths of the value proposition of going to the cloud is being able to have that kind of access you just described from anywhere.
That's absolutely true. And when you look at the private cloud options out there, you can get dedicated circuits, dedicated network from the cloud service provider's data center to your network in your premises. Alternatively, you can use VPN devices, and using the VPN devices from the cloud service provider make that distributed access much easier. But you could also run a VPN from your corporate headquarters, and that would probably be a little more secure.
Okay, so I saved this one toward the end here, and I've left some time because I'd like to hear both from both of you on the subject, and also the attraction here is obviously more control, ease of use, reduced cost, but discuss a little bit time frames. I mean, I think a lot of the confusion about the cloud is that somehow the migration to it is going to disrupt my company, right? Whether it's because of general migration issues, whether it's because of file transfer issues, whether it's because of downtime. There are all kinds of, I'll be nice and I'll call them myths. And let's walk through why this is really kind of painless.
So, I would say in general, whether you're doing a new deployment internally or migrating to the cloud, we've all seen systems come offline. And in this case, we're talking about planned downtime. And there are a lot of cases where, frankly, you really just can't avoid it. Or you can avoid it, but the cost is very high, and the level of risk stays high because it's very tricky to execute. And I think that migrating to the cloud really falls into that same category. If you're willing to do the heavy lifting and spend the time in planning, you can migrate without downtime, or at least without significant downtime. And actually, getting into those details is very involved. But again, point you back to the savvisdirect blog. I highlight a couple of methods for doing that. But the key trick is essentially moving your data. And that's really where the typical disruption would come in. But what people tend to encounter when they have the disruptions are trying to do too much at once. Instead of trickling data over time, they try and move it all at once. And there are plenty of ways to migrate data in part, and then really any downtime essentially becomes limited to converting domain name server registrations. Would be one example where you might run into minutes or a couple hours. But there's talent out there to help you plan your migration and make it, I would say, virtually pain-free.
So that brings us to the follow-up question, which is, okay, how long?
How long does it take? Well,
I mean, I know the answer is, well, it depends on who you are and what you want to do, but
yeah, it comes down to two factors primarily. How much data do you need to move? And if you're going to reinstall the applications in the cloud, how long does that take to install and configure? That's really what it comes down to. And then, there's ways to achieve this. A lot of companies will use a standard, let's say, server image of Windows that's hardened and has the proper monitoring and for security and performance integrated. If you take the time to create a template in the cloud that you can then reuse, that'll speed things up too. So there's plenty of ways to speed things up, but fundamentally it comes down to moving your data and installing and managing your applications.
Terrific. So I can see we're getting the hands are pointing toward the top of the hour, so this is going to have to be the last one. But it's not a bad way to end. The question is, I can see how scaling up would be easier with the cloud, but what about scaling down? Is that easy as well? And in fact, why don't you talk a little bit about the burstiness nature of traffic and why going to the cloud gives you that computing elasticity that everybody's looking for, and that's the attraction of the pay-as-you-go, pay-as-you-grow, pay-as-you-use kind of model that's being imposed here.
That's right. Scaling up and scaling down are two sides of the coin of elasticity, and scaling down is one of the most fundamental. And this is really ultimately why we got the cloud. Amazon, among others, but Amazon primarily in infrastructure as a service was looking at ways to manage costs around seasonal variability in traffic and usage. And the same holds true whether you're a financial institution or telecommunications. You have month-end close, quarter close, year-end close. You have open enrollment for your employees. You might be running a offer for a sale, or let's say it's the new iPhone. Everybody wants to buy it. There's so many reasons why you would scale up to handle that, but then you want to be able to scale down to save money and contain your costs and frankly just make operations life easier, right? So scaling down is vital to doing that, and that's one of the advantages of the cloud, and arguably the most fundamental.
But I think where the confusion comes in, especially as it relates to private cloud, is I'm paying for the rack space, I'm paying for all that other stuff. What you're basically telling me is that elasticity is a function of use.
Well, you're right. And with the private cloud, there is a fundamental difference in the sense that you are committing to a server of a certain size, and you are committing for some period of time. Typically, I don't know of any company that offers give me a server for 24 hours, a full dedicated server for 24 hours. Now, we do offer AppGrid as the primary mode of contract is a 30-day commitment. So that's pretty close to buying only what you need. But with the advantage being that I speculate, of course it all depends, but I speculate the typical AppGrid node, which is one server, could run about 35 virtual machines. So, what is it great for? Well, it's really great for the company that says, I don't want to have a data closet. I want to move everything to the cloud. And I'm, 30, let's say, if you're running a couple big virtual machines, maybe it's 20 VMs, maybe you need 2 nodes, maybe you need 40 nodes because you're going to have, 1,200 servers, or 120 servers, excuse me. And you can manage those as a grid, versus managing each node independently. The resources can be shared, so it's pretty powerful. And that is, one of those deciding factors. Am I moving wholly in concert to the cloud? Is a good opportunity for AppGrid. Am I putting my toe in the water? Well, you probably want to use shared infrastructure. So I think that is one subtle difference. So when you go to evaluate your vendors, we didn't talk about it, and shame on us, but looking at the contract terms and contract options is vital. If you're signing up for a dedicated server and it's a 3-year term, that could be a drawback versus a 30-day commitment.
Right. So no shame on you, William. We started with you. I'm going to let you have the last word. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of round off that discussion there, I mean, I think as more and more workloads are being positioned and placed into the cloud, once someone has this access to this dedicated space, what we are finding within organizations is that it's very easy for them to redistribute those resources to other parts within the organization as well, without having to go through that procurement process. So if there is a process of scaling down because of winding down of a project or a certain area of the business, redistributing that to another department and letting them have access to the same space then becomes very, very easy. So I think that's another good point to remember.
Well, unfortunately, we don't want to overstay our welcome, and that is all the time we have. First, I'd like to thank everybody for hanging in there. The percentage of people who started with us and ended with us was fantastic. And obviously, I want to thank William and Andy and savvisdirect for allowing us to have them share their knowledge and expertise. One last reminder, Check your inbox tomorrow for additional information on how to access today's webinar. And on behalf of TMC, we appreciate the time you spent with us. Thanks again, and have a great day.